Everybody, and welcome to another session of Onshape. Um, so the presentation I put together, I actually put more effort into that than the PowerPoint you're looking at here. But what I did is I thought about things that were important to me as a user compared to the other CAD systems and PDM systems that I've used over the years. So I ranked the 5 biggest things that makes Onshape unique and fun to work with, and I actually put them in order. So the first one I put is it's in the cloud. So what that means is that you can access your work from anywhere as long as you have access to the internet and on any device, which really makes things a lot easier. The second one is PDM, and typically we'll think of a PDM system as something extra that we have to buy after we buy our CAD system. In this particular aspect of Onshape, PDM is built in to Onshape. In fact, I think PDM is really the base of Onshape, and then the CAD is just kind of on top. We also can collaborate, which also makes Onshape very unique. We can have multiple people working on the same assembly, the same drawing, the same part. It lends itself really well for being able to create things quickly. And when we're collaborating, we can communicate, obviously, back and forth. We can comment, we can do markups, send back and forth images, things like that. These last two, I probably would flip these if I had to think about it a little bit. But configurations, Onshape does configurations, families of parts different than other systems do, and does it in a really unique way. We'll take a look at that. And then finally, history. Everything you do in Onshape is stored, it's saved. There is no save button because save is always on, and you never lose any work. So with that, we could say that there is no crashing. Crashing, you lose work. You have to start over if you're not saving all the time. This thing's saving all the time. I'm not going to say it doesn't crash. I've never seen it crash. And we're doing our presentation day. It might crash 20 times. We never know it. I don't know, but everything is saved. So let's kind of go on with this a little bit. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is it being in the cloud, and that means we can access it from a lot of different aspects. What I'm going to do here, so I'm going to call up a model. It's a fairly decent sized model. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to move my window over just a little bit. Maybe right here. And I'm going to also bring up my task manager. So I'm going to call up this boxcar. So it's a railroad car. And it's about half a gig, just a little bit over a half a gig. And what I want you to do is, while I'm calling this up, take a look at my CPU, look at my RAM, and then my Wi-Fi is going to be going crazy, right? Because we're going to be talking to the internet. We have the graphics processor on my laptop, and I actually have a high-end graphics processor that Onshape won't be hitting at all. It'll be using my regular graphics card. So let's open up this boxcar. So we'll say open. So it starts to bring it up here. We can see the Wi-Fi here is going nuts. Nothing with my RAM. My CPU pops up. This does this every once in a while, anytime you start any kind of application or anything like that. And it's always out sniffing around doing things anyway. But really, it's not hitting my CPU really of any aspect. And also, we can see that my graphics, my internal graphics card on my laptop is getting hit, but my high-end NVIDIA card isn't at all. It's pretty much a flat line as well. So what we're seeing is that all the RAM is on someone else's server. The CPU that's being used is on someone else's server as well. Here we can kind of take a look at our railroad car here, and we can kind of start rotating it around. One of the things that Onshape does, which is kind of neat, I'm going to kind of zoom in on this. It brings in the geometry, and then you'll notice here we got some coil springs. There's actually springs within these springs, and there they popped in as well. So the smaller things, it'll kind of leave coarse until you zoom in on them, and then it will bring those in. So we can see our half gigabyte model was brought in. We can work with it here. One of the nice aspects of this as well is that we can access Onshape from other applications or other, I guess I should say, hardware. So here's my phone with the same railroad car here. And I can just take my finger and I can rotate it around. I can zoom in, zoom out, pan. So all the same things I can do here. In addition to that, if I needed to, I can go in and work with all the features that are in Onshape. So just by selecting the button that we see right here, the feature menu comes up and I can start working on this model. Now, typically you're not going to be doing that on your phone, but you can use your phone to take place or use in design reviews, to look at some drawings, things like that. So all those capabilities are there, right there on your phone, which is really nice. And it's kind of an interesting aspect of this is that Onshape, about 25% of the time, people are using their phone to access Onshape, which is kind of interesting. So that was a little bit about the cloud and how Onshape works in the cloud. So I'm going to close out our boxcar here. And let's talk about our next subject, which is really PDM. And Onshape is divided into 4 main categories. And I have the enterprise license, so I have this extra little button click here called analytics. And I'll talk about each one of these. But the regular professional license that the majority of people get doesn't have this analytics. But the point I want to bring up is the things that is important to Onshape are action items, right? So action items are things that you need to do. So for instance, I can assign a task to somebody here. I've been assigned a task and it says, by Nick, he wants me to review and approve a particular component for release. So that has nothing to do with CAD, right? That's PDM. I can go to analytics. And like I said, this is in the enterprise edition, but what analytics lets me do is go in and take a look at different aspects of the things that I have done. My analytics, like the different parts I've worked on in the let's say the last 30 days, how much time I spent on each one, what type of activity was I doing? Was I working with assemblies or drawings or parts? Then we can go out on individual documents. I can look at a particular document. Who has access to this document? Who accessed it and when? And all that type of information is all here. Again, this has nothing to do with CAD. This is all PDM. Then we can see our activity. We'll take a look at that. But those are the things that I've been doing recently, my personal activities, so the different parts that I've opened and closed and things like that. And then finally, there's documents. And documents, again, is going to list out all the documents that we have in Onshape, the things that I've been working on. And once I open one of these documents, then we're in CAD. But up until then, everything that is important to Onshape all has to do with data management. And that's the nice thing is we don't have to buy another data management product to manage all our data. It's already built in. So let's take a look at looking for something. So I'm going to go over here. I want to search for something. And I know what I'm searching for is an assembly. I don't know the name, some new part that we got. So I don't know the part number either. What state is it in? We could say it's in progress, right? Because I know that it's brand new. No one's done anything with it too much. And I could say, let's search for that. So again, it's going to go through all the components and assemblies and drawings that I have out there, and it lists out all the different things that we have here. And there's too many, right? So I want to narrow this down a little bit more. So I'll come back here and I'll say, let's add a criteria. This is all metadata type things. And here's one that I made up. It's called source. So I added this. And under source, I'm going to either say we make it or we buy it. In this particular case, I know it's something that we bought from somebody that we want to use. And if I search now, it'll go out and use all these filters again. It brings back one component. So this is what I wanted to look for. So this is a third-party piston that we bought from somebody that we use in our designs. So now that we have this sitting here, if I wanted to make a drawing of it, I can just right mouse button and say, let's create a drawing. And since this is a purchase part, I don't need to have a bunch of dimensions and things like that. Maybe some notes in there describing maybe the stroke length or the diameter of the piston or something like that. So I'm just going to do something real quick. I'm going to use a custom format that I created for our company. I'm going to say, let's put it on piece of paper that shows 4 views all at once, and then just say, okay, let's do that. And it automatically sets it up for us so that we have our purchase component on our paper, and now I can just release this to the system and everybody can use it and it's documented. You know, obviously we document this more if it was one of our components and something that we make, and obviously it's going to have to go to the shop floor and maybe to customers, but internally we just need to have this as part of our system here. So now that I have this, I can just go in and say I want to release it. This is all PDM stuff too. So I'm going to take this drawing, you know, so it grabs all the components and everything. There's an automatic part numbering system. So at this point, this is when it gets the unique characteristic. I could have called each one of these components the same name, and Onshape really wouldn't care. But here is when we say we want to assign a part number. That's when it's unique. And there is a part numbering, automatic part numbering system that we can customize. In this particular case, I'm just going to say, let's grab all of this. You know, set automatically for an assembly. It gives it ASM. That's how I have the prefixes set up. But again, we can control how many characters and all that type of thing. It wants a name. And we could just say, you know, it's ready for release. And at this point, I can give it an approver. Remember how I had that activity where I had to approve a release? Well, now I could give this, you know, give somebody's name here, pick somebody in the company or group of people to approve this. In this particular case, I'm just going to say, you know, I'm going to release this. So this releases the drawing, the assembly, the components, everything, and now it's part of our system. We can start using it as a released product. So that's a little bit about the PDM aspects of Onshape. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is collaboration. So here I have an assembly and just a simple couple of components here. And again, this is part of a chair, and the piston that we're looking at is actually going to work with this chair. But what I want to do is I've got, you know, some of the base geometry created. I want to invite someone to work with me on this so that you know, they can do the work that they're good at doing. So I'm going to say, let's share this design, and we'll share it with an individual. Like I said, I can look at our people in our company here. I can also invite outside people to do this, although they would only have view capabilities. I need someone to really do some physical work on here. So I can also control what they do. So he can make copies of this. I don't want him to export this anywhere, Nick, but and we'll say, let's share this with Nick. So now that's been shared with him. He gets an email saying Bill has shared a document with you. So here is Nick, and we'll kind of refresh his window. And there you can see the chair that I've shared with him. So he'll select on this. And what we'll be doing is we'll both be looking at the exact same assembly. In this particular model, we have a couple of different files in here. The one that initially I want him to work on is this one. So these are the same components. One of the things that he could do is he can set it up so that, let's kind of move him over a little bit. And we'll take my window and move that over just so we can see both of them on the screen at the same time. So here we go. He can go and say, I need to follow you, so that when I zoom in, he zooms in. So basically, when I can explain to him is, you know, we need the piston, you know, connected over here. You notice how my mouse is just a regular arrow, but his mouse is like a little green hand pointing at things. I could say over here, and then maybe, you know, the other connection point would be back in here. He's totally independent to rotate as well, right? So he can do whatever he wants. I could send him a comment, right? And either I can do the comment to everybody sharing on here, I can assign it or kind of label it exactly for him. And so I could say, for Nick, add a piston. I'll say let's add it. I can also create a markup, so it will zoom in on this. If I say markup, brings in my image, and then I can kind of draw whatever I need, circle the areas that I need, things like that, and attach that. Also just regular images and things like that as well to kind of help communicate. But when I do that, I send that over to him. You notice his window automatically popped up. Can you add a piston? He can say, sure, no problem. He can reply back to me. I can see the reply, and we can continue going back and forth. But he knows what he needs to do now. So we're going to be Nick for a little bit here, and we'll work with putting in that piston. So Nick has the assembly of chair sitting here, and he needs to insert another component. So he's going to say, let's insert an assembly somewhere in our system. He can look through things. Here's his piston. And we'll add this. You notice there's a little triangle there. It means it was released because, remember, I just released it. So we're going to add this in. We'll just place the piston right here for now. But one of the things I'll do is I'll say, let's kind of zoom in. Now that I'm in assembly mode, you notice that over here on the left side is, creation mode, right? That's where we have sweeps and extrudes and all those types of things. Here in assembly mode, then we have pin joints and sliders and ball joints and things like that. So in this particular case, we're going to create a revolute joint. And we'll just say, let's just pick, and it uses these things called mates, but wherever I pick, it can pick different areas. So here I'm just going to pick the center of the circle. That's one place where we're going to place this. And the other one, I'll kind of rotate this a little bit and place it right there. And we could say, let's flip the direction. We'll maybe offset it a little bit. We could say like 4 millimeters, just to kind of center it. So now we've got the base part of the piston sitting here. Now we want to assemble the rest of it. So I'm just going to grab this guy, kind of pull him out a little bit. And we'll do the same type of thing. We could say, let's add another constraint. We'll say, let's this time use a cylindrical constraint. We could say the center of this circle or hole. I'll line that up with this guy right here. Say okay. So now he's added the piston in here. And this is now able to, obviously move the mechanism. If we go back here, if I go to the assembly, so I'm just in the part studio portion here. If I go to the assembly, obviously I see that right away. So let's go back to the part. One of the things that I realized is that this component here is kind of backwards. We really need to have a plate in the front, and we don't really need that one in the back. So I'm going to make a change here. I'm just going to go into changing this part. It's a sheet metal part. And I'll say, let's get rid of removing that face, and instead we'll remove this face. Right? So now we've got the flat metal part there. And then also we want to create a couple of bends here. Right? So we'll say, let's just add a bend here and add a bend there. So we've added our bends to our part. Now, I haven't completed the command yet. So you look over at Nick over here, he doesn't see it yet, but watch, as soon as I hit the check mark, it updates over there as well. There's no notifications. You don't have to sync with a data management system, do any of these updates or any of that crazy PDM stuff that you have to do in a lot of other systems. Because it's all built in, it automatically just updates as you're designing, which is the way you want to have things done. So that's a little bit about sharing and being able to collaborate inside of Onshape. So the next thing, let's take a look at, and this should probably be number 5 instead of number 4, but it's configurations. And we're used to having systems be able to make families of parts. And everyone uses a table. And you use a table and you put in all the different types of things there and all the different things that vary in columns. And you can use an Excel spreadsheet if you want, but they end up being a lot of times really, really big. Onshape does things totally different with configurations. So it has the regular table type of thing that you would have in any other CAD system, but then has a couple other options as well. And I'll explain to you why this is better. So we can have a table, right? We can have different variations. So for this particular bearing that we see here, instead of putting dimensions in here, because if there was like 50,000 different variations of dimensions, I'd have 50,000 different columns here, which would be crazy. It'd be huge trying to find something that I need. In this particular case, I haven't put any dimensions in the table, although I could. I have different features, different aspects of this. So I can have this bearing just kind of flat along the top here. I can have a flanged version, which will put a little flange on the end, or I can have a retaining ring, which has a groove around the outside here. So I'm just kind of turning on different aspects of that, turning on kind of different features in our table here. And that's another aspect right in the tables, is that you can also turn on and off different things with the table approach. Now, the other part I have is a variable. So there's a dimension that drives the diameter of this bearing. It's driven off the shaft that it fits on. And that variable is, we enter it in. So when we do our family of parts, when we pick the instance that we want, we're going to enter in like 3 different things, because there's 3 different tables here. And you can have more or less. But what it does is it only enters in the information, and then that gets applied to everything else. And you can see how it makes it a lot shorter. So here, I can say, let's change the diameter to like 1.5. When I change that, it changes to 1.5. I could change it to 1.07392, and it would change it to that. And if that was one of our real products, I'd have to add that as a column in a table. I don't have to do that here. I just put in variables, and it throws that at the table that we have here. And then finally, at the bottom, we have a checkbox. And that's in the case of this case where we have an assembly, the checkbox either turns on or off components. If I was in a part, it would turn on or off features. But since we're in assembly here, we have some seals here that are sealing up the bearings, and we can either suppress or unsuppress those. So the 3 different columns or 3 different tables that we have are right here. Here's the sealed one. I'm going to say take off the seals. So now we can see the bearings here. Over here, remember we said we could have a flanged version of this. So here we can see the flange is added right here. Or we could say, let's use retaining ring. Now we have a retaining ring on our bearing. So you can see that we can make it a much more efficient process of creating configuration, especially if you do a lot of configurations, just by breaking up the table and having the user enter in a couple of different aspects of it and build it that way, instead of trying to fish through 10,000 different cells in a table to figure out which one you want. So that's one of the nice aspects of Onshape, is the way that it approaches configuration. You can still use the table if you're old school, want to do things that way, you can still do that. But it has these other capabilities as well that really make it nice. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about is the history and how things work with that. So let's take a look at the history of this part. And this is the same with any component that we have. We can come over here, and this is the history tree. So we started at some point A, and now we're at point B. But what did we do in between? I can just hit this arrow, and it shows me all the different things that I've done to this component since then. So all of this is saved. Every time I do a command, anytime I remove something, make a modification, it's saved automatically. There is no save button anywhere in the system. So one of the things we can do, since we have this history, is we can go back to any point in time and say, I want to go forward from this point. This is really the point that I wanted. All the stuff that I did later on, forget about it. And so it will. Another nice aspect is we can take any point in time and compare it to any other point in time. So I'm going to go back to the very beginning of this part. I'm going to say, let's compare him to where we are now, the part that we see here on the screen. So it goes back and it does a comparison between the two. And it's going to show us where it was at the beginning, or where it looks now. And then it also gives us a list. Here are all the features of the changes that I've made. So as we highlight each one of those, we can kind of see them highlighting over there on the screen. because I imported this part, it didn't really have any features to begin with, right? It was just one giant import feature. But over here, we can kind of drag this, and we can also reverse this, right? So maybe I'll reverse this. So what we're going to be looking at now is the model when we started off, or when we imported it in. What did it look like? So it looked like this. And then we can drag this little drag handle, and we can start to see how we change things. So here we took this whole face and we rotated it here. We can also see over here, the red is the modifications we made. We actually moved it over this way from over there. And if we look on the bottom over here, initially we had some pockets over here, and what we did is we removed the pockets, and then we actually expanded this guy out as well. So you can see it kind of expand as we do that. So the whole history of the different changes we can see graphically like this, or we can just go and see it visually, listing out the different changes that have been made. But again, everything that it has done is saved. So that's a really important aspect of Onshape, is that everything is preserved. You can go back to any point in time, and you can always compare different aspects or different time stamps and see how you got to the point where you are now. Especially if you're pulling up somebody else's model, you can kind of go through it and see certainly the process that they went through, how they developed it, and things like that. Which, trying to debug parts, trying to get them to behave the way you want, that's a really nice tool to have. But those are the 5 things that were important to me, right? These are the things that I found really interesting about Onshape, that are different than anybody else, and really makes it a good tool to work with. So at this point, I'm going to roll it back to Ryan for any closing comments. And if you have any questions, let me know as well.
Thanks, Bill. And as always, great job with today's presentation. I don't see any questions today in the chat box, but as I mentioned earlier, feel free to visit us at onshape.eacpds.com. And we would be happy to answer any other questions or provide more information. You can also register for our next webinar on our events page there. So with that, though, I hope everyone has a great weekend, and thanks again to all for spending some of your Friday morning with us.